What recording studio did your mom work at?
It was a studio off of Michigan Avenue there. It was called Sound Studios.
Okay.
And so it was interesting. They were started in mid-'70s.
Okay.
And she got a job initially as a secretary, and then she worked a bookkeeper. And what put them on the map is they had recorded a live broadcast of a Barry Manilow concert that he did in Chicago. And they tweaked whatever they did, but that kind of put them on the map. And so from that point, they did a lot of recording sessions, voiceovers, and so I would go on weekends with my mom.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, and so I was exposed to a lot of different things, and by the time I got into my teens, one thing that Chicago had was back in the 70s, an urban station took the opportunity and said, there's a new form of music that's coming, it's going to be popular, why don't we start promoting it? So what they did is some of the DJs they reached out to started doing mixes on the weekends. And so some of the stations did mixes. Some of the house music at that time, and house music would be music with bass. A lot of, not much vocals, just a lot of bass and a lot of, and so eventually, the DJs started recording their own songs, and that started to become popular. And so by the time I got into my teens, a couple stations had really had a huge listening audience. And then there was another top 40 station that was owned by CBS. And so they how do we get in on this? And so they rebranded it to Top 40, which at that time was your Paul Abdul, all that stuff. And so they put together a whole new concept of it. So they started doing mixes on the weekends again. And it just blew up in the city of Chicago. And so that really, I just so much gravitated toward that. And the other part of what I listened to was, I was a huge MTV fanatic. So growing up,
when they played music.
Oh yeah, when they played music. So I grew up with all that 80s hair metal stuff.
Yeah.
So it was like the two things are what I really gravitated toward. But I started working with turntables at the age of 15. And then slowly graduated, and then by the time I was 19, 20, I was ready for clubs. And so I was a club DJ for 10 years.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I worked
Did you wear a big mouse hat when you did it?
big headphones.
I asked about the studios. When I got into pottery, I was going to school for audio engineering in Central Florida.
Okay.
And I still dabble today. I got a little project studio at home, but
Yeah, no, it was called Sound Studios, and I think so. By the time I got to 15 or 16, they were bought over, and the people who ran it or bought it over weren't sure what they wanted to do, and they just completely destroyed it. So by the time I got old enough to where I'm like, oh man, I want to work there, it was not what it used to be.
And Chicago is what made blues big, man.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
All the old blues guys come out of Louisiana and all them play ahead of Chicago,
and the movie
man.
that actually started it all, believe it or not, was the Blues Brothers.
Really?
Because what
the Blues Brothers, they featured John Lee Hooker on there.
Yeah, because see what so Lee, man, it's interesting how let's go back in music history. Elvis, okay, he loved blues and he loved gospel. And the problem is a lot of your artists at that point weren't getting the radio play that they needed to get. And Elvis came along and changed the game on that.
Yeah.
He not only was getting the radio play, but some of the money he was making, he would give to some of these artists and say, go produce your songs, go produce your records, let's get you out there.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he was a big believer in that. And so back in the 70s, so Chicago, there's this famous street which was showcased in the movie, Maxwell Street, Halstead Street. Man, back in the 70s, any given weekend you go down there, it's exactly how it looked. If you watch that scene in the movie, it's exactly how it was. People marketing, trying to sell CD or trying to sell tapes, 8-tracks, whatever was popular at that time, that soul food, that sausage, that onions, all that. I mean, that was like that back in the 80s when I would go down there as, a teen. And so because of that, the blues really got its home, it got its start. And Chicago, it's like it became a hub for all this music because there had been that generation that had grown up with your Neil Diamond and all that. Well, now my generation comes in, and it's like, we want more of this, and less of this. And it just became huge. One of the groups that, sticks, okay? There's a station in Chicago called WLS. Well, WLS at the time was playing your rock. And so one of the guys, even though it wasn't in rotation, picked up the song Lady, which was on a demo. And he picked up the song Lady and started playing the hell out of it. Before you know it, WLS picked that song up on its rotation. And one of the guys reached out to Styx and said, hey, we'd like to have you on our show. And they had no idea. They were starting to get these calls, not realizing that WLS was the reason, because they were putting this song into their rotation. And that's how that whole thing started blowing up for them.
Wow.
And so Chicago just became like this huge, so like back in the 80s, the music scene and of course industry was picking up. Well, Mike Ditka became coach of the Bears. I mean, you started to see something was happening, because at that time, Chicago's sports teams were horrible. I mean, the Bulls, before Jordan came on, they were like a bunch of druggies who'd be lucky they could make a game and win the game, or make the whole game without collapsing. That's how bad the Bulls were in the 70s.
That would have been me as a basketball player.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad culture. And then, I figured Ditka came around, and because he was Bears royalty, started coaching the team. And I mean, the 85 Bears are considered the best NFL team in history.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so that was kind of garnered, and then you started seeing all these things, because Chicago's like a blue-collar town. A lot of industry. The stock markets were still young at that point with downtown Chicago. Mm-hmm. They hadn't really come into play as heavy, but it was the mid to late 80s where that started to turn around as well. And the nightclub scenes. There was an old Limelight theater, or old Limelight nightclub in Chicago that didn't make it because it was trying to produce what it did like it did in New York. Mm-hmm. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Fred who had opened up these, what he called snuggeries, as a place for people to go hang out, and we'd have DJ and dancing. It wasn't a nightclub concept yet, but it was a place for people to hang out and drink and have fun.
Snuggeries?
Snuggeries is what it was called.
Snuggeries.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like a sleepover more than a...
You would think that's what it would be, but it was more of a snug, like a place where you can come and just be comfortable.
Gotcha.
No judgment. And so he made a bold move and bought this building, and it was he turned it into a multi-level nightclub, and he called it Excalibur, and became the flagship for his nightclub chain, and it just blew up. And so I think from the age of 18, as soon as someone would take the chance and hire me before I was even legal enough to work there, I was there. And my mom just...
Chicago's got so much history.
It does. My mom was like, just history. Always keep in touch with me. Call me, let me know where you're at, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But, as soon as I could hit the ground, I was running. Yeah.
There would be no blues music today if it wasn't for Chicago.
There would be, if it weren't for that influence, there wouldn't be some forms of music at all. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, the blues is
because people forget, like when your 90s hit, when your groups like Disturbed and all those came to play, and you're like, oh my God, this is great. I'm like, yeah, but without this happening, these groups wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, all the music feeds off of itself.
I took my daughter who's 17 to see Buddy Guy this summer. She said, why don't you take me to see Buddy Guy? I'm like...
Because you're in for a show.
Yeah, you're in for a show, number one. I was like, but without that period of time and who he studied under and played under, you wouldn't... I mean, his daughter's even a hip-hop star today. Mm-hmm. But I was like, you wouldn't have half the music that you listen to.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it was nothing to see, like, in the Buddy Guy Legends Blues Club and all those B.B. King clubs. I mean,
but so many of those musicians went to Chicago and recorded there, man. Even before Chess and all those. On the old wax rug.
Yep.
I think this will make a good bonus video. I'm going to record it the whole time here.
There's a book, if you ever are interested in, I think it's still on Amazon, but it's called This Day in Music History. It's produced by my friend Mike Walter out of New Jersey. Okay. And he did a breakdown of just every day what that day meant in music history. Really? And it's like this thick. Huh. And even when I thought I knew about music history, I was like, oh my God, I never knew that.